The small suburban neighborhood of Green Pines looked perfect from the outside. Freshly painted homes, neatly cut lawns, and a seemingly quiet community that promised peace to anyone who moved in. For me, it was supposed to be the place where I could finally settle down after 2 decades of serving as a Navy SEAL. My name is Jack Thornton. At 47 years old, I had seen enough of the world, combat zones, covert missions, and operations that would never make the news. When I retired, all I wanted was to spend my life with my wife, Emily, and give her the safety and stability she had always deserved. But there was one thing I hadn't counted on: the Homeowners Association. The HOA in Green Pines wasn't just a committee of rule-enforcing neighbors. It was a power-hungry group of individuals who loved control. At first, their rules seemed harmless: trash bins out only on Mondays, lawns trimmed weekly, cars parked in driveways facing forward. But soon, their enforcement officers started patrolling like they were a private army. Emily hated confrontation. She was gentle, patient, and always tried to smooth things over. But I could see the way these so-called enforcers intimidated her when I wasn't around. They would circle the house, snap pictures of our garden, and leave warning letters for the smallest infractions. One morning, I left early for a contractor job outside town. Emily stayed behind, planning to tend the rose bushes she loved so much. That's when it happened. According to our neighbor Mrs. Hernandez, who later told me everything in tears, 3 HOA enforcers showed up in broad daylight. They claimed Emily had planted flowers outside the approved color scheme. My wife tried to reason with them, explaining that the roses had been there when we moved in. But they didn't care. Words turned into shouting, and shouting escalated into one of them grabbing Emily's arm when she tried to walk away. Another shoved her against the porch railing. Emily cried out for help, but most neighbors stayed behind their curtains, too afraid to intervene. The HOA had built its reputation on intimidation, and nobody wanted to be the next target. When I returned that evening, I found Emily shaken and bruised. Her left wrist was swollen, her eyes red from crying. At first, she tried to downplay it, not wanting me to overreact. But I could see the truth in her trembling hands. Something inside me snapped. I had spent years defending my country from enemies overseas. I had put my life on the line to protect strangers. And now, in my own home, the woman I loved most had been assaulted by arrogant bullies who thought their petty authority gave them power. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The next day, I went straight to the HOA's so-called compliance office. It wasn't an office in the traditional sense, it was a rented space in the community clubhouse. 3 men sat behind a desk stacked with files and citations, acting like kings of the neighborhood. "Can I help you?" one of them sneered when I walked in. I didn't answer. I just placed a photo of Emily's bruised wrist on the table. The room went silent. "Your men did this," I said, my voice low and steady. "And I'm here to give you one chance to make it right." They laughed. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head, leaned back in his chair. "Look, buddy, your wife resisted compliance. Sometimes people need a little persuasion. If you've got a problem, take it up at the next board meeting." Persuasion. That word hit me like a spark to gunpowder. I leaned closer, locking eyes with him. "I'm not some neighbor you can scare. I'm a retired Navy SEAL. And if you ever lay a hand on my wife again, you'll pray you were never born." Their smug expressions faltered, but only for a second. They still thought I was bluffing. That night, I began preparing. Not for violence. I wasn't going to let rage control me, but for strategy. I knew how men like this operated: intimidation, fear, control. To beat them, I had to dismantle their power. Step 1 was evidence. I spoke with Mrs. Hernandez and a few other neighbors who had witnessed the assault. At first, they were hesitant, afraid of retaliation. But when I promised to protect them, one by one, they came forward with stories of harassment, extortion, and even property damage caused by the HOA enforcers. Step 2 was exposure. Using my contacts from the military and some friends in law enforcement, I compiled a file on the HOA's activities. Bank records, shady fines, illegal surveillance. They were running what amounted to a criminal racket under the guise of community standards. Finally, step 3 was confrontation. The next board meeting was packed. Normally only a handful of residents showed up, but word had spread that I was going to speak. People were tired of living in fear, and for the first time, they saw someone willing to stand up. I walked into that room with Emily by my side. Her wrist was still bandaged, but she held her head high. When the board tried to start the meeting, I slammed the evidence folder onto the table. Before we discuss lawn heights and mailbox colors, I said, we need to address the crimes committed by this association. Gasps echoed through the room as I displayed photos, financial documents, and signed witness statements. Neighbors whispered, their fear turning into outrage. The enforcers tried to interrupt, but I didn't flinch. Years of combat had taught me how to command a room. My voice cut through the chaos like a blade. You assaulted my wife. You extorted this community. And you thought no one would stop you. But your reign ends tonight. By the time I was done, half the room was on its feet, shouting for the board to resign. Someone called the police. The enforcers, once so cocky, now sat pale and silent as officers led them away in handcuffs. Emily squeezed my hand, tears of relief in her eyes. For the first time in months, I saw her smile again. Green Pines changed after that night. The corrupt HOA was dissolved, replaced with a fair committee elected by